Welcome to the NEA Big Read Door County. This year, the NEA Big Read is a program of the National Endowment for the Arts in partnership with Arts Midwest, and we were fortunate to get the grant to be part of the Big Read again this year. Our Multicultural Book Club meets every first Tuesday of the month at 1 p.m. And you should feel free, even if you're not a regular member, to join us anytime. The list of books we'll be reading in the next 6 months are posted on our library calendar. So you can go have a look and join in. Welcome you. This program may touch on various things, hearing others' opinions, and to participating in intellectual freedom in a respectful manner. Since this is a discussion, I will not mute everyone because I want you to participate. But if you find that you have some background noise, please mute yourself, or I will mute you if it's interfering with the discussion. So does everyone know how to mute? There's a little microphone.
I might have some noise because SpaceX is launching it. It's supposed to launch in a few minutes.
Wow.
I'll run outside and watch it.
So also be respectful. It's to each other and try not to talk over each other. Sometimes that's kind of difficult, but we'll do our best. And this event is being closed captioned, and we're creating a live transcript. So you should be able to see the closed caption, and we'll have the transcript for later. You cannot have, apparently, the transcript open in your chat and the chat at the same time. But you should be able to see the chat if you go to the closed caption and say, view, hide full transcript. That's a little confusing, but it's something new we're doing. For the list of upcoming programs, you can pick up an NEA Big Read Door County brochure in the library, or you can go to doorcountyreads.org for complete information. You can also find the links to all of the programs on the doorcountylibrary.org calendar. And let me quickly show you, I'll quickly show you where you can find a really neat brochure that we made. That is the brochure you can pick up here in the library, but if you're not here, if you're in Florida, you can come and have a look at the brochure online. Let me quickly show you. This is doorcountylibrary.org, our website. And down here is the link to the brochure. If you click on it, it'll pull up a really neat version of the brochure. Give it 1 second and then click this full screen, and it looks exactly like the brochure you would pick up here in the library. You can turn the pages. You see all of the programs, and it'll have all the login information. So have a look there if you don't have the opportunity to come in and get it. So we have quite a few people here today. I also wanted to point out that we have a Door County Library Multicultural Facebook page.
Hello.
Hi. That you're welcome to have a look at. There is a really neat, I sent this to some of the members. There's a really neat brochure that shows all of the characters in the book. It's pretty amazing because a lot of people I know in our book group love to keep lists of characters. So the way to find that is I put it on the Multicultural Facebook page, or just Google Station 11 characters, go to images, and then you'll see that pop up there. It's really helpful.
On your website, Laura, you said?
There's a Door County Library Facebook page, not library, but Multicultural Book Club. But here, I'll show you how to find it yourself really easily. Let me get with this. I think
We can do this too. We can do this.
I know how everyone in our group loves to keep lists, especially Adele. So let me show you quickly. So here is our website again. If you just go to, what I do is
Oh, that's fabulous.
Station 11 characters. If you type in Station 11
I like this.
characters,
Mhm.
It's just some useful thing someone put on a blog. Go to images, and then here's the whole list. So it's pretty amazing, as I say, because it maps out everybody and color codes everybody in the book. So that's how you can find it. So
Mhm.
let's get started. This is a pretty in-depth book. I really loved it when it came out in 2014. I read it at that time, and I really loved it because it has so much depth. It refers to so many different books and pieces of literature. You have to keep rereading it and going back and trying to understand all of the different levels that she's dealing with. Emily St. John Mandel is going to be a speaker here in our program later on in next week. So I hope you'll all be able to hear her, but she actually doesn't have a lot of formal education. She was homeschooled. I don't think she actually got a high school diploma or a college diploma. She went off and studied ballet for a while at the age of 18. So you can see through her writing that she's extremely well read. I think she spent a lot of time reading and writing because there's
That's amazing.
So as I said earlier, I'm not going to mute anyone because this is a discussion, but if you do find feedback or you're having trouble with the sound, please mute yourself when you're not speaking. Okay? Does anyone have an idea who the main character is in this book?
Arthur.
Well, I'll say my,
Kirsten, it sounds like Kirsten.
I think it's
Well,
Arthur.
I was going to say that I thought it was Arthur, because all the characters revolve around Arthur. Because
Good point.
Yeah, yeah.
in some way.
But he's gone so early on.
Yeah.
To come back to him.
Yeah. I think it's kind of like an ensemble.
That's good.
You know, it's not just Arthur, but it's Javon, it's Kirsten, it's kind of like Friends, you know, the TV show. It's kind of like there isn't anybody that's one dominant. It kind of, you need these, especially these main characters, to kind of move you through it.
Well, everyone has a connection to Arthur, though. It all comes down from Arthur.
yeah, and I personally sort of felt Miranda was the main character myself, just because maybe I identify with her. And I also think that she is Emily herself, the author.
Interesting.
A lot of what happened to her apparently happened to Emily herself. She was born on a small island in Canada, or Vancouver Island, and then lived on a small island just like Miranda. And that graphic novel is so much part of the whole thing. And also, I've been reading so much about this. Apparently that party in the book that's so pivotal was actually a real party in New York in her life. So I sort of see Miranda as a focal character.
See that too? Mm-hmm.
Well, anyone have any other ideas about that?
This lady's out there feeding her.
So anyone, do you think we should mute people and then you unmute yourself in order to speak, or what do you think?
I don't even know how to do that, lady.
Well, let's see. How do Shakespeare motifs coincide with those of Station 11, both in the novel and the comic book? Anyone have ideas?
Not on that one. I'm so ignorant on Shakespeare.
Well, you have the players doing the play Midsummer Night's Dream, plus the beginning, of course.
Right, King Lear.
And
Mhm.
Miranda is a famous character in the town.
Miranda.
Yeah. And Arthur is his name is Art. It's all about art, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Wow,
Miranda-
that's a good connection.
Miranda's not in Midsummer Night's Dream. That's a character from a different play.
The
Yeah, the
Tempest.
Tempest.
Right.
But
And-
I personally love the Tempest, and I kept seeing in this that famous quote about this brave new world and all of the people, the beauty, how beauteous mankind is, and in a sense, I got that feeling of wonder from Kirsten as she was going around this amazing new world. Maybe that's too positive of an outlook.
We need that now, Laura. So that's not bad.
Yeah. The plague plays a very major part in Midsummer Night's Dream. They refer to the plague many times in the play.
Huh.
And it was written as a kind of respite from the play, but also drawing attention to it. So, and maybe some of you already know this, so I'll be quiet.
No, I wasn't
Need
really
that.
fully aware of that, so if you can expand on that, that's really interesting.
Yeah, it was produced right after the theaters opened again after being closed, as they are now because of plague. And when people needed something light and not to deal with something too heavy, and yet when Titania talks to Oberon about the horrible things that are befalling the world because he stole this child from her, a changeling. She says all these plagues are happening because of you, and so there's always reference, to the plagues, and so it was a very important play for the time in terms of reference to the plagues, but also needing to have something lighthearted too, to give some respite from it and not too serious like the history plays. So.
Oh, that's really interesting. I'm gonna have to read more about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyone else have any comments? What about the King Lear in the beginning? How do you think that fits into the whole story? Of course, it's kind of obvious that he's failing.
He's dying.
Yeah.
He's dying right at the end when King Lear's dying. It's like,
And I didn't think of this till just now, but Lear has 3 daughters. Arthur had 3 wives, didn't he?
Yeah, that's true.
mhm,
And he
mhm.
never quite connected with them in a way.
Right.
I think you could just spend months going through all the little references to the Shakespearean plays, and then when we get to the symphony, all the musical references, all that stuff. To analyze every one of those little things would take months. You could just make a big, huge chart of all that also, because it's so rich in all that.
Did anybody participate in the discussion on or listen in the panel discussion on Saturday? I
Yes,
found that really fascinating.
yes.
And one of
was
the mentions,
wonderful.
one of the musicians mentioned, one of the professors mentioned that he loved the way the symphony players were referred to as like 7th guitar or 2nd clarinet or whatever, because that's what you actually do in rehearsals, in music rehearsals, in an orchestra. And you don't refer to people by name. But the idea, he thought the seventh guitar was funny because there are no guitars in a symphony orchestra, but they just grab whatever instruments they can find in these houses. And if it's guitars, it's guitars. And he said, and that's probably what you're going to end with. Everybody dabbles on guitar a little bit, but you're not going to have, a classical trombonist necessarily, although they did have a trombone. So I thought that discussion was so much fun. Has it been recorded so that people can go back and listen to it again? Or
Yes, I haven't double checked, but it should be recorded and it should be put up on our YouTube channel.
Yeah, so I highly recommend you all listen to that. You'll learn so much from this panel.
Yeah, it's there. It's there. I looked.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I don't know if anyone bringing that into another realm. Has anyone watched Mozart in the Jungle on Netflix or whatever? They have the same sort of environment of a small symphony where they're always having the different characters who play the different instruments. So it's a kind of interesting theme. And Emily did say she patterned the traveling symphony off again, Shakespeare, and the plague, after the plague, when there were traveling theater groups and that whole, they mentioned, didn't they mention, someone mentioned
Well,
that?
I think it was in Romania or something. He was down there skiing and a bear, a brown bear, they're being overrun.
Well, what about the whole survival is insufficient? So we go from Shakespeare to Star Trek. That's one thing I really love about this book. And I had to look up a word, which I was not too familiar with. Text.
What word?
Hmm?
What word?
I'm trying to find it. It's intertextuality.
Oh,
I mean, you can sort of figure out what that means, but where you're exactly what we've been talking about. We're pulling in all of these threads from all different pieces of literature.
mhm.
So she really is an amazing author in that way, isn't she?
And back there.
Laura, did the high school students read this?
I believe there's some that will be reading it, and she is going to be speaking to the schools, some groups in the schools. So yes, but that won't be promoted online for everyone. That'll be with just the students.
Ye-
But what do you?
Yeah, I thought this book would appeal to just such a broad range of people.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and is everyone aware it's being made into an HBO series?
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, there will
Yeah,
be
that'd be
a
interesting.
talk about it at the very end of our program schedule, about how screenplay is put into from a book to a screenplay. So that should be really interesting also. But that should reach a huge audience, and then I'll bet the book will just take off again.
Mhm.
So why do you think, one thing that I'm just throwing in there, I read that the NEA is taking the book off its list of official books in the future. Why do you think they're doing that?
I just missed it. What she said.
You think because the plague is too much of a sensitive subject these days? Anyone
I
have?
think there were so many characters, it was hard to keep track of everything. But I would just keep reading it anyway, and then finally it would make a connection with somebody.
John,
I think it may be taken off because it hits pretty close to home of where we are today. And the post-pandemic world there is probably not like what we're going to be experiencing. And I would maybe like to talk about that a little more, what the post-pandemic world looked like then and what ours might look like in a year or two.
What's the criteria for the NEA selections?
I'm not
No?
really sure. You'll have to go to their website and review it.
I have to agree with Adele, though. I think it's a little scary, and it is close to home, and it might create some more conspiracy theories.
Well, and to be honest, we chose this book to be our
Yeah,
of the year way before the pandemic hit.
I know. That's
And
just
it was
remarkable.
such a coincidence to have that come in now and then have to read this book. And so far, it seems to be getting a good response. Did anyone have trouble with reading a book about the pandemic during a pandemic?
No, so many more people were dying and no electricity. And I mean, there was so much different than our pandemic.
So far,
Right.
Adele.
Or, yeah.
But it
Yeah.
did give me the willies once in a while, though, to read some of the commonalities, just how fast it was going through. And that one part when, forgot who it was now, at the beginning when he was going to the grocery store and buying all the groceries and buying all the groceries. I thought, oh my
Yeah,
gosh, how did
Jivan,
she
yeah.
know? Yes, Jivan. How did she know? How did he know? How did she know? That we may be going through this ourselves when she wrote this.
Well, from what I've read,
Yeah.
she did lots of research. She did a lot of research, especially on the plague during the time of Shakespeare.
Mm-hmm.
So, but
Yeah.
it did echo what we all saw with the toilet paper, didn't it?
Right.
Scientists have been, yeah, I think scientists have been talking about this for a really long time. It's been of concern to people in that area. There was a whole pandemic response team that had been put into place that had sadly been disbanded.
Mhm.
This previous administration disbanded it, and so there was no team to go to China and kind of deal with it, as there was with the previous Ebola and SARS and all those other. We had a pandemic response team that went and helped keep it contained, and we didn't have one this time. It had been disbanded, so people have been concerned about this for a really long time.
Mhm.
I do have one chat comment that could people mute unless they're going to speak? So maybe we should give that a try. Because there is some feedback from different microphones. Thank you. Did everyone understand that graphic novel, Station 11? I had to keep rereading and rereading to try to understand what actually was going on in the graphic novel. And what do you think about that whole part of the book?
Yes.
Station 11 is a graphic novel that Miranda was writing throughout the book.
Well, the fact that she only wrote 2 copies or made, just 2 copies of it, it must have been very personal for her and what was happening. Well, she started before the pandemic, but yeah, it must have been very personal for what was happening in her life, I think.
What do you think her purpose was in writing it?
Well, she liked to do the artwork. She said she liked to sit and do all the art and develop what was going to happen next in the story. So was it an escape for her to get away from her husband and not have to deal with what was happening there?
What does everyone think? It reminds me of that whole idea that Joseph Campbell talked about, following your bliss. She seemed to really become absorbed when she was working on it. And even though she didn't necessarily expect anyone to read it, it seemed to be an outlet for her.
She was bored at work.
Bored at work.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's part of it, but is that enough reason for her to spend so much time on it? To really dedicate everything to that graphic novel? And what are the parallels of the graphic novel to the actual story of the book? Any ideas?
Didn't she say on many occasions that she didn't really know where it was going? It was almost a self-discovery kind of thing. One thing would lead to another. I think that for me was the parallel with the major story, is one just didn't know. And the whole idea of I just want to go home. Everybody was feeling that I just want to go home, and where is home? And I think that was a major theme in the graphic novel. I would have to go back. It's been a while since I've read the book, so I'd have to go back and really look at the details about the graphic novel to look at the metaphors and see how they match up. But I think she's too clever a writer to have it just be arbitrary and willy-nilly. I think there's a definite matchup there somewhere, and it's up to us to find it.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that she's.
I don't know how to join in the conversation.
You are joining in right now.
Oh, you hear me?
Yeah.
We do.
Okay. Well, here's my take on Station 11, the title.
Yes.
I kept waiting for this novel to take me into a science fiction world. And I guess in a sense it was, but the only connection to the title was the graphic novel. Otherwise, you'd say, what the hell is Station 11 all about?
So what do you think is the purpose of that for the book? Why do you think she named it that?
That she left it down on 8th Street.
Was it plastic?
Use the reader.
Yeah, there's fish and some paperwork and
Janet, something or other.
Sorry. What was that? What do you think was the parallel? I also kept, I'll throw out another thing besides that, following her bliss, which was her passion to draw and to write. I've been reading a lot about Abe Maslow. I mean, this is where this kind of book takes me. Is anyone familiar with his hierarchy of needs? A
Sure,
lot of people have written
hierarchy.
about this book in relation to Abe Maslow.
Yes, familiar with it.
And isn't that really this idea that we have the basic needs of survival, food, water, and then safety?
It's down at the bottom of the triangle. That's at the
Right,
bottom
right.
of the triangle.
And
when you
at
get
the
to
very
bottom-
top is self-actualization, which really isn't that survival is not enough in a way. And I would say that's her outlet for that graphic novel. It's something that brings her beyond her everyday life. As you were saying, Jim, she was bored at work. So this was something that allowed her to go beyond everyday life. Anyone have any comments? Adele?
Well, I also bring it back to pandemic. A lot of people are during this pandemic time when we are at home, finding what new and varied ways of self-actualization, whether it is through art or music or other creative indulgences or activities. So maybe that was a little bit about connecting to where we are today and where we have been for 9 or 10 months and where most of us still are. Sort of a sanity. If we just sit at home and do nothing, we will soon become ill, just mentally ill. But if we can find ways to fill that need for self-actualization, we remain healthy.
Yeah. Did you have something to add, Jane? Oh, no, just lifting your hand.
oh, just the whole traveling
Symphony.
symphony was all about more than just basic needs. I mean, they were artists. They were all artists. So that was a central part of the book, beyond the basic needs.
Well, yeah, and that was a lot of the point of the book, that they were the artists. And let's see, does anyone have something that you want to mention?
I had an interest in the geography of the novel, and finally I figured out, well, we're coming down the east side of Lake Michigan. But then when we got to the bottom of Lake Michigan, I presumed that she turned west. And I forget the name of the city where it all comes, where the Museum of Civilization was the airport of that city. And I figured that was Michigan City, Michigan. No, Michigan City, Indiana. That's Michigan City, Indiana is what I figured.
Oh.
Maybe Gary. Gary had the airport too.
Yeah, half the cities she mentioned are real, half of them are made up, aren't they? And I know there's a lot of people who are speculating. Is it Severn City that you're talking about, where
Severn.
had the Museum of Civilization?
Yes.
And let's,
You know, it's interesting. We're talking about Maslow's hierarchy, kind of going back to the airport and what happened. I think that was really interesting how when, you know, the pandemic hits and this group of people find themselves at this airport, how it starts with survival and then it slowly, the society builds again, where they start taking care of one another. They assign tasks. They said, you know, years later they have schools, again, moving up that Maslow's hierarchy. You know, again, to trying to like, what's really important and what do you really need to survive? What does surviving really mean?
mm-hmm. And that ending was sort of a look towards the future, advancing even further and seeing off in the distance the electricity. How did everyone like that ending?
No.
No.
Why not?
Well, it didn't resolve the story very well. I thought that, well, maybe they would continue on to the town with the electricity, and the characters didn't get resolved in my mind very well.
Well, they got rid of the prophet, didn't they?
Yes, he got killed. He was a strange character also.
Yeah, what did you think about him? And I have one question here, that he says, the prophet discusses death. I'm not speaking of the tedious variations on physical death. There's a death of the body and there's a death of the soul. I saw my mother die twice. What does he mean by that?
Physically and probably mentally.
You think during the pandemic she may have, I mean, his mother, of course, was Elizabeth, the wife of the second wife. And what does he?
I mean, maybe the first death was the first death, she's alive, but first death could have been a mental death. You know, she lost her mind, possibly something like that. And then she physically died.
Well, wasn't she the heavily religious person who took him off to Israel?
Yeah.
Elizabeth took him off to Israel, correct?
Yeah.
That was his second wife, wasn't it? His second, Arthur's second wife, I think.
Yeah. Arthur's second wife, yeah.
Yeah, so Tyler was Arthur's son, right? The prophet.
Oh, no, I didn't put that.
The prophet was Tyler, yeah.
Oh, yeah. The minute he mentioned the dog's name was Luli, I mean, that's the dead giveaway that he obviously had a copy of and we knew, and we found out later that he was given that copy of the graphic novel, and that he named his dog Luli. So after the dog in the graphic novel. So that, I mean, that was what do they call those, Easter eggs or whatever, little nuggets? When you if you pay attention, you can kind of be ahead of it a little bit. Yeah, that he clearly became the prophet. I thought that part of the book was just brilliant for me, about seeing how people kind of make up a reality and live it and what it's based on. And we see so much of that around us all the time. I mean, it was so authentic to me how this is exactly what would happen. There would be a whole series of weird prophets and who are so sure that they were right. I just read a wonderful book called The King of Confidence about J.J. Strang, who right here in Wisconsin, who set up, he called himself the king and was the prophet, and he said he was Mormon, but he really wasn't. He was just a charlatan. But still, it was just nuts. I mean, it's a fascinating book if you're interested in that kind of thing. But just a quick comment about the ending, seeing the village or the town or whatever with maybe has electricity off in the distance. It reminded me so much of that animated film, The Triplets of Belleville. Did anybody ever see that years ago? It's about a bicycle racer who's enslaved and has to ride his bicycle constantly to power the generator. And it's just wonderful. And it just reminded me, I thought, well, how do they have electricity? Of course, they figured out that you need bicycles and you just, and so that's probably the start of something like that. So I want to read the sequel. I kind of want to know what's over in that other town.
And I had trouble with it too. Someone on one of the message boards I read said, why didn't everyone just go to the libraries and get all the books on how to build solar power and all this sort of thing? But there was apparently a lot of chaos in the beginning. So I kept worrying about all the reality of that sort of thing. So we could have had solar energy, not just bicycle energy, right?
Correct.
Solar.
I think Elizabeth, she was saying, to Tyler And to people around her, she said, everything happens for a reason. And I think that was very important to Elizabeth for her to be able to continue during the pandemic. And then Tyler turned into this prophet who became very controlling and violent, but he also felt everything happened for a reason.
Yeah, and how old was he compared to Kirsten? Does anyone remember? Were they about the same age? I kept wondering, okay, she was about 8 years old when the pandemic.
When the novel started.
How much reading did she have? How much practice reading did she have at that age? I kept fussing about that. So here they are with these graphic novels and looking for books and things. The older people, of course, could read, but what about these young kids? Was anyone teaching them?
There was one part that really made me think, and that was when they were talking about who was better off 20 years after the beginning of the plague. Was it the older people who knew what it used to be like and what the world was, or is it the young people who didn't know and they're just starting out with what they've got and just going from there? I thought that was an interesting concept of, which is better, or if any is better.
And I don't know that one is better than the other. They're just different experiences. You don't know what you never had. So somebody who was born into that, that's all they know. Whereas the older people had experienced life differently and may have experienced a lot of loss as to what they used to have. And, the other thing that struck me on this was just about the gratitude of what we have today, even with the struggles that we've got going on. We do have the electricity. We do have ice. We do have, we've got everything. We've got the warmth of our houses. We have resources, we have food, all of the things that they were going without. And it just brought up gratitude to me every time they brought that up, of something that they were struggling with that they had lost. Even water, even fresh water. That was kind of interesting to me.
Yeah, plenty of fresh water.
Yeah, I felt exactly the same way.
Mhm.
So how lucky we are, even though we're in the middle of a pandemic.
Right.
The discussion about who is it harder for, the older people or the younger people. We had that discussion within my daughter's family because her daughter went off to college and her mom was lamenting, oh, she's not having the college experience I had, and da, da, da. And her daughter said, Mom, I'm having my own experience of what college is. And this is, I'm living out and living through it. She took some time off school to go to one of the Hawaiian Islands, and she's working on a farm there. So, and she went with two of her college friends. So this is the way it is for her. And she accepted that, where her mom was fretting over it.
Yeah, that's true. It would, the older people had a lot of anxiety probably over what they'd lost. Did anyone feel that? We all appreciate what we have, but did anyone feel anxiety over what we've lost too?
I think what sounded for me was the fact that in today, we are so specialized in what we do that so many of us would have trouble surviving. How many of us know how to grow our own food and, mill flour or whatever you have to do, where back in Shakespeare's day, people were much more self-sufficient. They didn't have as much, but they knew how to take care of themselves better.
Has anyone camped out in the winter? Oh,
No way.
Because this is taking place in the northern, starting in Toronto on down. Right?
I have camped out in the winter. It is very challenging to stay warm and dry, especially dry.
Yeah.
One part of the book that we have touched on is the tattoos, the tattoos of the knives on Kirsten's arm. That was a really dark part that she kept coming back to. And apparently there's a whole year of her life that she just doesn't remember at all, that her brother told her about. And that part of the book really got to me, I think. The idea that a number of people in that story ended up killing people. Yeah, so I don't know if other people thought of that, but that was the most intense part for me in a way.
Well, and we saw that, a little bit of that, didn't we? With that guard where they killed him. Right. So obviously there was a lot of violence. I mean, Kirsten was lucky to have her brother for a while, but that must have been traumatic to lose.
Yeah, I guess in a way I would say the author could have made the story even more depressing by really emphasizing what happened in those first couple years even more. She kind of moved on. It was bad at first, but yeah, she kind of hints at some of the things that happened. But yeah, it could have been worse, I guess.
And in fact, I read that she wanted to skip over that and focus on what the aftermath is of the collapse of society once it's settled down. So I think that was her purpose, but it is interesting to think about it.
Another thought I had was the significance of some people, this 20 years later, wanting to live basically in isolation, traveling by themselves, living off the land, kind of, or in maybe tiny groups, where other people preferred to create their brand new family, like in the airport or the symphony. They kind of created their own new group. So I thought that was interesting, the way some people approached that, which was for them isolation or family.
Yeah, community or isolation. Well, what do you think you would put in the museum of things? What do you think that is important to go in there?
I have some ideas. I could not live without my insulin, and I have a pump, and I depend on medical supplies, but I would really miss my Cuisinart. Because I can make grated zucchini and grated carrots for my muffins in just like a second. And lots of it.
I thought about that a lot too. You know, in the old days, women stayed home and cooked all day long. That's the traditional idea. And they almost had to, because there was so much labor involved in fixing food, as someone was saying, milling flour and everything else involved in that. So if we had to go back to that, we have so many conveniences. Everyone, you see all these commercials today, I can't quite believe it, where you have your dinner delivered to you in boxes or something. Has anyone tried that? But what a different world it is from what it would be if we lost all of the infrastructure. Anyone else have anything you'd put in the Museum of Civilization?
Well, to me, it would be something that I wouldn't want people to forget that we had, that was important to us. So I guess I would be more basic, and even if it was books or something that they can no longer create or produce. Yeah, that's what I would go with.
There's actually a web page that's been created for anyone to submit an idea for what you would put in the Museum of Civilization. It's in the brochure. If you have a look there, you'll find out how to do it. I submitted something. I submitted a picture of a post office truck in our neighborhood, because to me, the post office, the delivery of mail is miraculous, considering that it was mentioned in the Constitution, and how do they deliver mail to people all over the world? You know, going way, way back through today. That is pretty astounding, I think. So I put that in the Museum of Civilization. Any other ideas on that? Would you rather be an actor or a musician in the traveling symphony? Do any of us, do you think you would qualify to be in that group? Or what kind of group would you look for if you were in that situation?
Interesting. I'd look for a group of readers, and as we moved about, we would talk about books.
So maybe you take over a library instead of a museum.
In fact, if I were going to put something in the museum, it would be a photo of the library or of a librarian helping somebody to connect somebody with a piece of literature.
Any other ideas? Anyone have any ideas? What
Adele, why would it be only a photo? Why wouldn't it be the library?
Well, Cressa, how big is this building? Can I put all the Door County Library in it? Well,
that's true, but I would hope that what would get put in would be a collection of Shakespeare or collective works of an author that you like, so that there would be the opportunity for people to teach people to read, for people to become readers so that they could be part of your group, Adele.
Okay, well, I actually probably meant the concept of a library, and that concept of a library to me is unlimited access to literature. Okay.
Okay.
And they were certainly collecting things.
I think that I was too broad in saying a library, but I would hope that books would get put in the museum.
Absolutely. Metaphorically, I use the word library, but I really mean the concepts and contents.
Okay, thank you.
Well, when you're talking about, okay, musician or an actor, since I would be neither, but in my world, it would be art and crafts, more crafts than art. But to me, that would be another way of bringing something to the people that lifted them up. So you had mentioned, what would you do? What role would you play? That would be mine. I would be knitting. I'd be knitting like crazy.
What about a book of photographs? Because if they no longer have their phones, and so they couldn't, I know a lot of people in the pandemic have entertained themselves by looking at all their history of pictures. And you can't do it on your phone in Station 11, but you could have a book of photographs of over the whole history of art and whole history of man. And that to me would be something that should go. You can always look at a picture then.
So maybe collecting, books rather than other kinds of artifacts would be more valuable. That would be my
to us, to book club, to book club for sure.
But then you have to
You could do also like a series of photographs of a day in the life of someone. You know, a day in the life would be a way too of what it was, a life back in, pre-pandemic would be interesting too, for those who never lived it, what life was like.
So you'd have to really draw. You wouldn't necessarily have the camera, right? Unless you reinvented them.
No, true. Unless you could find photographs or, from the houses that you raid and that kind of thing. But yeah.
Yeah. I think how-to manual is really important. How to build a house, how to skin a squirrel. All of those things would be important. If we're building a library, let's include some of those.
So why do you think she chose to have a museum of things rather than a library? Maybe it'd be too easy if you had a library.
Things were available.
What was that, Jim?
Things were available.
They were available?
Things.
Change?
Things.
Things.
They weren't, okay, yeah.
So they're kind of collecting things that don't work anymore, right?
Everything doesn't work anymore.
Do you think there's a difference between being a musician or a actor in a group where you're participating as a community versus being an artist who works alone? There's Coggin saying yes.
I would say yes too.
Yeah, I think the group is better than the individual.
And do you think there's a difference between someone observing a play versus artwork?
Oh, yes. It's more interactive with a play. It's more real.
Yes, but when you create a piece of art, you kind of want to share it, show it to people, maybe even teach somebody else how to do it, you know, and look what I learned how to do kind of thing. And again, I'm not talking about super duper fine art. That's not who I am. I'm a crafter. So that's, you know, just to me, you would share it to help other people enjoy that feeling of accomplishing, creating something.
Mhm.
What did you think about that whole thing about Victoria, Dear V? Did that add to the story?
Oh,
You didn't think about
Who?
it.
Did you say no?
yes.
And why not? Just an extra little thing, or did it reveal something about Arthur?
That could be, yeah.
Something that was not needed.
Not what? Needed. Is that what you mean?
That he was, what did you say that?
Something revealed that was not needed.
So you think it revealed something that it was not needed
Yes.
to show his more emotional side, or? Which was
I
your,
thought the book was interesting, but I read Earth Abides years ago, and it was a better book.
Yeah, I agree.
We're done.
Earth Abides. Remember that book?
I can't think
Earth
of.
Abides.
Earth Provides.
Yeah, I mean, that was a big book discussed for years.
Yeah, I thought the Victoria character was kind of interesting because it revealed a lot about him and the things that he wrote to her, and it was shocking at the end when it turns out that she never answered. We all assumed she must be answering, and in order for this correspond, and he was using her like he used everybody else. We thought that this might be the one genuine relationship that he had that was a mutual kind of thing, and in the end it turned out to be just smoke and mirrors. I mean, he was using her like a diary, like a journal, and he got his comeuppance when she just decided to go ahead and publish it for the money, and that was the end of that. I mean, it was shocking and disappointing, and because you just held out a little bit of hope for him that there was a thread of something there.
Yeah.
But the thing that was redeeming is that he realized at least that he got what he deserved, in that he was not that as upset as other people were, because he figured he got what he deserved. He at least understood that. I thought that was kind of interesting, and I wondered if she'd had a friend that had betrayed her in some way from her hometown, from this island, that she was drawing on another personal kind of experience that she just really wanted to get in there in the book. It would be interesting to see when she speaks at the end of the month, you know, if anybody asks her about that, of how much of it is, you know, which experiences were totally based on real experiences, or if they're all just riffs on smaller things.
Yeah, I have the feeling a lot of these are based on real experiences. So, well, we're getting up towards an hour now. So does anyone have anything you want to add that you were impressed by or thought was really important? I mean, I've actually gone through this book 3 times now, and I still don't remember a lot of the details. So every time you read it, you pick out something new. Do you think this was a good choice?
Yes, and our choice coming up of Hamnet will be a return to the days of the plague also, because of it takes place during the plague, and of course involves Shakespeare's son. So everyone should be
For those
returned to that.
who don't know, the Multicultural Book Group will be reading a book called Hamnet later on, and you can see the full list of books we're reading on the Door County Library calendar.
I'd like to say thank you for this discussion, because I read this book 2 years ago with the Egg Harbor group. And I really thought it was out there science fiction that I didn't need to deal with. And I think at that time, maybe that was a justified opinion. But I think I didn't understand why it had won all these awards. I didn't understand. And then I heard Emily St. John's Mandel speak. And I thought I didn't get her at all. But the more I hear people talk about this book, the more I understand why it's a good thing that we're reading it, why she's considered an excellent author. So I thank all of you for your insight and helping me gain a knowledge of this book.
Has anyone read her the latest book, The Glass Hotel?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Your opinion?
It's much more accessible than this one. It's much more, it's easier to take. It's not as horrific. It doesn't happen to the whole world. And it led me to reading more about her. And it's somewhat, well, it's autobiographical in the sense that she came from this small island. It's just more accessible.
I'd like to hear what Ruth has to say about this. She's smiling at your comments. Ruth, can you unmute and talk to us?
I'm not sure I have all that much to add. You have too much faith in me, Adele.
Sorry.
But I did just finish the Glass Hotel, and I was trying to see the parallels all along. And when someone asked the question about, do you think that she had a betrayal in her past, and maybe when she does the book talk, we can find that out. There are lots of betrayals in the Glass Hotel. So.
Thank you, Ruth.
You're welcome.
Just a little warning, if you do read The Glass Hotel, and she does have some of the same characters, of course, in the book, but don't think it's a sequel or a prequel or anything related to Station 11. It's like she's created an alternate world, an alternate reality, as if these characters had a whole different trajectory if the plague never happened. So I think, so don't get yourself crazy trying to figure out how the books fit together. They don't.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that because I have not read The Glass Hotel, but I did hear her speak. There's an excellent interview with her recently with the Los Angeles Times, where she's talking about what she would have done differently, having experienced a real pandemic. But she did mention that she likes certain of the characters, so she was going to just include them in other books randomly. So that's exactly what you're pointing out. I thought that was fascinating. You don't see that happening very often, do you? That sort of thing. So it should be
very
kind of,
random.
what?
It's very random.
Yeah. So is Jeevan one of the characters? Isn't he?
I don't think so.
No?
Do you think so, Ruth? I don't think so.
I think you see it frequently. I think some authors pick.
Miranda and her boss from the shipping company,
Right.
are the
Right
two
there.
major characters. And is Victoria in there too? I can't remember. Maybe, I don't know, but those are the two main ones.
Mhm. Well, interesting.
Leon Prevant is in there.
Well, that's the next book I'll have to tackle, but let me say thank you for joining us. I hope you can join us. There's going to be a play reading it's called The Children. It'll be done by the members of the Third Avenue Playhouse, and that will be February 5th at 7 p.m. In order to find out how to sign up for that, you can go to thirdavenueplayhouse.com. There's also going to be a very interesting talk with Jared Sontak from Right on Door County and Athena Kildegard about the intersection of music and poetry on February 6th at 10 a.m. All of those, the connection codes are in doorcountylibrary.org calendar, and then also the NEA Big Read Door County website at doorcountyreads.org. Also, we do value your opinion, so if you could fill out an evaluation form, that would be appreciated to see what in particular you're enjoying. I'm excited, as I've said before in this group, that we're going to hear from the author herself, and then I'm really excited to hear her talk. She is going to be talking to Patrick Somerville, who is from this area, actually Green Bay. His mother lived in Sturgeon Bay for many years, and he is writing the screenplay based on the book for HBO. So that should be really fun. And when we asked him to do a program for us, he said, "Oh, I'll get Emily to join me." So it should be a really good conversation. So be sure to look for that one at the very end of the series of programs. So thank you.
Could I mention the launch that's happening right here a few miles from me, supposedly at 2:00 of Starship S9
You were saying?
and SN9 and from Boca Chica. And if you want to watch the launch, I don't know, is it supposed to happen at 2? Might be too late, or a launch. I've driven down there and I've looked at these starships, and to look at them, you'd think you were back in Buck Rogers' time. You'd think they would be these fancy, elaborate spaceships, and they look like they're tin cans. And so I'm really identifying with this Station 11 and the graphic novel, and looking at what these things look like that are going to carry people to Mars. And so it's just like unbelievable experience. If anyone's really into the space thing, I recommend going to their website and following and looking at the pictures and following some of that, because it's so coincidental that it would be happening all now.
Is that SpaceX you're talking about?
Yes, it's right. It's just down the road from me here in Texas.
Yeah, that's really
so I've seen 2 of them. Well, I saw the one that exploded. You could see it right from my house. But to drive down there and see them before they're launched, you just can't believe that you aren't in a Buck Rogers comic book, because of the way they look. They don't look like anything 21st century. They look like something from when we were in the 1950s.
Yeah, I'll have to look that up.
And Flash Gordon, that's what they look like. Tin cans.
I have to go. Thank you all so much for letting me participate. I know I'm not usually in this group, but I thought I would take advantage of it being a Zoom meeting, and thank you, and nice to meet you all, and I have to run now. Bye.
Thanks for coming.
Come back next month. Thank you. Goodbye. Have a nice month.
Well, thank you, everyone. See you next
Thank you. Yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.